All right, hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to American Vindicta. I'm your host, Doug Fortin. So, right off the bat, we're going to talk about gun violence. Quite a bit of this news that's going on. I would like to give you some stats and then talk about some other stuff that's going on. And the reason why I want to talk about this right now is because it's becoming quite the epidemic this year already. If you are not aware, mass shootings in 2023, here are the statistics. 134 mass shootings. 2 of those shootings were at schools. 196 have died so far. 470 have been injured. Now, to some of you, that may, just sound like Detroit on a busy weekend, but that is actually quite a staggering number compared to 2022's beginnings. And let's go ahead and break down 2022. Mass shootings in 2022 were 695 shootings. 762 people were killed. 2,902 were injured. 5 shootings happened at schools, while 2 shootings happened at places of worship. I know at least one was a church. Now, in regards to other violent crime, like you still have a higher amount of people that are dying from other sorts of violence. But the reason why this should be very alarming to you is because it's growing out of the inner cities violence that you happen in these large democratic areas, and it's moving sporadically across the country to rural areas and to suburbs. Now, the reason for the violence is really unknown. I think people are unhinged in this country right now. You have a lot of talk of civil war happening in this country. Hell, I say it all the time. It feels like we're in one already. And very few people, I would have to say, are well protected from this type of violence. Now, one of the things that I was talking about the last time we broke down the Nashville shooter was to always be carrying a cat tourniquet or a soft T tourniquet. I'm not sure if I actually gave away what I would say tourniquets wise to use. Don't use the rat's tourniquets. Don't use the shoestring looking stuff. Use a cat tourniquet, which is what ER doctors recommend that law enforcement and military wear, or a soft T, which is a little bit better of a upgrade of this, but honestly, they do the same thing, except for this windlass right here is plastic, and with the soft T, it's metal. And make sure that you buy it from a reputable company. North American Tactical is probably where I get almost all of my stuff. So, I don't get paid to say that. Shout out to them. They produce good material. That's where our law enforcement community gets a lot of their stuff from. So, 134 shootings this year. In 2017, the FBI started to document this trend of the active shooters. And they said in 2022, by that time, that active shooters in this country have rose by 1,000%. 1,000%. Now, I want to break down active shooter and mass shooting real quick. So, what I gave you are the stats for mass shootings. An active shooter can just be one person killing one person, or it could be one person shooting and not harming anybody. We actually had quite a few of those in 2022. But the sad fact is that mass shooters or active shooters will inherently always find a soft target to kill. So I say that because, and I think that the shootings are getting out of control. It was already out of control, but way beyond our average control of law enforcement. And the average civilian needs to be trained. The average civilian should be trained up to the same level as your local law enforcement, if not just a standard armed security guard. But many aren't. Now, you do have quite a few people who are professional shooters, who are avid shooters as a hobbyist. And then you have, some good old boys who are just naturally good with their guns. And then you have the 99% of Americans who do not know how to operate a firearm correctly, safely, or shoot accurately. So I created a active shooter awareness and reaction program. And what this was intended to do was that it was intended for me to be able to build a bridge between my years of law enforcement and military training and trying to breach the gap with civilians who don't have the same level of training, don't know who to get credible instructors and credible training with. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of guys who do this, who actually teach firearms training and probably way better than me. But I'm not necessarily teaching you firearms training. I'm teaching you active shooter training. I'm actually teaching you tactics. And that tactic is not how to subvert the government. So put your pencils down, FBI. Oh, we're going to talk about you here in a little bit, FBI. Don't worry about that. But my goal was to say, look, the little old lady down the street who doesn't have the training, uh, the young man who just picked up his first pistol, he's always playing with it and he's nervous about it, and doesn't really know where to get training from. And I've met a lot of you guys, and there's nothing wrong with this, but a lot of you guys, you get your first gun and you go to the gun store, you get your first gun and all the accoutrements with it. And then you go to the range and you stand 5 to 10 feet away from a target and you hesitantly slap that trigger and your rounds go all over the place. And you do that once every couple months or maybe once or twice a year. And, and you consider yourself armed and prepared for when the Russians come. You know what I mean? There's a certain level of training that civilians should have. You In the Revolutionary War, everybody had a certain level of training. In the Revolutionary War and prior, everybody had firearms, some sort of firearm. They had some sort of, even armor, if you would say that, even with the old English laws. Like it was punishable by death if you did not have like a sword, a spear, a bow with a certain amount of arrows, and then eventually it became a musket with a certain amount of rounds to go with it. And the men were called upon to be if the Lord of the land called upon them, to be that crack militia, to form up and to go out and thwart the enemy. And so, years of progression down the line, we now have law enforcement, and that has seemingly replaced the militia. And in a lot of ways it has, but in a lot of ways it hasn't, because your Second Amendment right gives you the right to bear arms. And everybody in this country deserves the right to bear arms as long as you're not a damn felon. Or committed, a violent crime, a sexual assault sort of crime, domestic battery, all yada, yada, yada. But I am absolutely 100%, 1,000% for civilians owning body armor, owning long range rifles, shotguns, pistols, AR-15s, AK-47s, 50 calibers, night vision, thermal, own it all, man. You're an American. Buy it while you can. But what I don't like is when people buy all this stuff and they don't get the training for it, because all I'm saying is for a lot of you, you're setting yourself up for failure for the day that you need to pull that gun out and place a well-placed shot upon a attacking assailant, because we should be thinking of these things as defensively okay? But let me throw in a offensive question. Let's say here you are walking through Walmart and you start to hear the very familiar sounds of shots being fired from a firearm. And you know that it's not balloons exploding, which I've heard before. You know that it's not two pieces of wood being beaten together, which I've also heard before. And the reason why I say that I've heard that before is because we have, through shootings or, just been in interviewing people who've been in shootings, giving active shooter classes to federal government employees, like civilian employees. A lot of people just don't know even the sound of a firearm, at least when they hear it with their own ears. And there's a thing that happens in your mind where you immediately go into doubt. No, that can't be a gun. We're in Walmart, and it's my kid's birthday, and I'm here buying a birthday outfit and cake and all this other stuff. So it can't be a shooting. So you immediately go into this negative regression where you're like, it's not a shooting. That's got to be construction. Maybe it's the balloons over there by the aisles. The balloons started to pop. And then the next thing you hear is the screaming. And then you see the panic and the running. Okay. And here's where things break down. We always talk about having a gun and using it defensively to defend yourself. But what if you have to defend somebody else? What if you are put into the clear line of present danger and you have to stop the threat? Which is one of the things that law enforcement says all the time in regards to our training and how we train. We train to stop the threat. The threat of what? The threat of violence, the threat of, getting my feelings hurt. In terms of deadly encounters, we stop the threat, meaning that we kill the shooter. But because of lawyers and their jackassery, we have to say words like stop the threat. You stop the threat, which means you do whatever you have to do until the person who is trying to commit murder in front of you is no longer able to commit it, which means if you had to run them over with a car, cops have done that. If you've had to blow them up with a little robot and a stick of TNT or plastic explosives, cops have done that. If you got to hit them from a long range shot, a far away, military and cops have done that as well. So why is it that civilians are never trained, though it's always you who's put into that situation and you expect me, law enforcement, to come and save you? Understand this. I wholeheartedly believe that 95% or more of law enforcement, when the time comes and they hear the shots fired, will go code, which means lights and sirens, and they'll be running straight to where the action is. Not everybody. Parkland shooting, we saw that, right? School resource officer did not do his job. So when you have a factor of, let's say, 90 to 95% of cops are always going to do what they are paid to do, which is to come and to save civilians from people trying to kill each other. Or, maybe there's like let's go high and say a 5% who are going to cower or create an excuse. I've known a couple of those guys who will create an excuse not to go on a call. Then you, my friend, are on your own. And though we are called first responders in law enforcement, and I'm no longer in law enforcement, so I can say this type of stuff now without any fear at all of my supervisors hounding me. But we are not truly first responders. We are second responders. Firefighters, EMT, they're the third responders. There's a little jab to my brothers in red. I am never just on time. I am always late to the party when it comes to a shooting in law enforcement. Always. Doesn't matter what area, unless the threat is aimed at law enforcement, then the threat is always aimed at civilians. Does that make sense to anybody? If the threat is not aimed directly at law enforcement, that means somebody is gun up coming at me, then they are coming for you. So why are you not trained properly? Ask your state representative that. Go ask your sheriff that question. Why do civilians and law enforcement separate themselves? It's a very good question. I think a long time ago, law enforcement basic training was created in such a way that it makes the trainee view the public as the enemy. And because of that, we disassociate ourselves from the public. So, because of that disassociation, law enforcement is actually quite hesitant, I would say, to get on the range with civilians. Now, I have trained many, many, many people, and my God, some people are just better not having a gun. Not meaning to take away your Second Amendment right. I'm meaning some of you just literally, the safest place is in front of your gun. Now, I'm picking on people that I know, not people in the crowd. But if you're one of those people, well, then I'm jabbing at you too. You need training. You need a lot of training. You should be training on your own. On your own. You should be at home doing your own training. How can you do firearms training at home? Well, stand by. Okay, so how can you do training at your house? Now, unless you live like I do out in the country and you have your own firearms range, then most of you are probably not going to be able to go into your suburban backyard and start cranking off a mag or two into a target. So, how do we get around that? Well, there's a company called Umerics who does not sponsor me, but I promote the hell out of their equipment. The Glock 19X, they have other models, but I like the Glock 19X from Umerics, is what I personally use here at the house. And I've been using it quite a bit lately, mainly because of the fact that ammo is very, very expensive. And I don't know, over the period of a year, I have drastically gone through way too much ammunition, way too much ammunition shooting, at least several thousand rounds. So I have switched to using airsoft. Now, I know some people will roll their eyes and say, oh, it's a kid's toy. And you're right, it is a kid's toy, but it does have a practical application when using firearms. Here is the Umerics Glock 19X. Okay. Now, if I took it and put it next to my Glock 19, you're probably not going to see much of a difference, except for the fact that you're not going to have this little orange deal right here in the front. And there were actually, I think it was a Bloods. It was either a Bloods or a Crip. I believe it was in New Jersey. There was a Blood gang member who had actually painted the front of an actual pistol orange, and I believe actually killed a cop with it. That happened a long, long time ago when I was actually working in New Jersey. So the story might be a little bit wrong, but I do know that that was actually a thing that we got intel wise to start looking after or looking out for. So this is a blowback. So as the gas, which is inside the bottom part of this magazine, pretty cool. All you got to do is pull this little pin thing down, slide this forward, and then you insert your gas right here into it, hold it down, fill this with BBs, with just this little spring, put the BBs in, holds about 17 of them. And then obviously put this 4-plate back on. All right, 4 plates back on. And now I have a charged and loaded magazine goes into the airsoft weapon. And I do call these weapons, all right? Because you can seriously hurt somebody with these. And as you fire, there's actually a blowback. It will blow back when you fire. Okay, the slide will actually move and reciprocate, which is great for training because it will also jam. Now, here it is, empty magazine, and this is one of the most important parts of firearms training that I try to get across to people, and I actually teach it at my firearms course, is to do emergency magazine reloads. Now, here's a tactical magazine reload. I eject the magazine. I have another one already in my hand. Insert. I retain this magazine, put it back in my person. Okay. Or you have the emergency reload, which is where I just want to drop and put another mag in, slide forward, and I'm back in action. Now, what's great about this, once again, is I can do all this cool stuff, magazine exchanges, basic fundamentals of marksmanship, which means getting my hand placement, getting my eyes on the sights, right? I actually have a holster that I bought from Amazon of all places, but I actually like this. These holsters are made here in Texas. Bravo Concealment, all right? It's a little $20 holster for a Glock 19X from Bravo Concealment. It's outside the waistband. And for an airsoft gun, a toy, it is a solid fit into this Kydex paddle holster, which for a lot of you, if you have leather holsters, this is just my opinion, okay? Doug's opinion. Doug's opinion doesn't mean very much, but, you know, my experience might. Get rid of your 1911s, the revolvers that you carry on you, and get some sort of a Glock. That's my personal opinion. Now, if you want to get a really Gucci 2011, 1911, you want to pay a crap load of money for all these other different various types of guns, go ahead, knock yourself out. I love every kind of gun. But the reason why I tell people Glocks, either a 9mm, so you're going to be between the 17 and 19, or you're going to want to get at least a 22, so that's a full size 40 Smith & Wesson, or, you know, go with a 45. But the reason why I say stick with Glock is because law enforcement has stuck with Glock. And because military has stuck with Glock for so long, still uses Glock, even though they have recently transferred to 6 Sauer. And you can't go wrong with 6 Sauer or Glock, all right? But the reason why I tell people to stick with Glock is there is more modifications for Glocks. There's more holsters for Glocks, okay? And when shit hits the fan and the country has gone to hell, you have a way better chance of finding Glocks and everything to go with them and the ammunition for them than you do any other weapon. So the Glock, the AR-15, the 12-gauge shotgun, 20-gauge shotgun, and then AK-47 type. All right. If you stick with around those firearms, when everything goes bad, you actually have a very high chance of ammo retention, meaning that you have a high chance of finding ammo to refill that gun, which is probably going to run out very quickly with some people. Some people are going to be quite trigger happy very fast. And because for most of you out there, the safest place is in front of your gun. For those of us who are skilled, who have experience with firearms or combat experience, law enforcement experience, For many people out there, it's not going to be a good day when you try to play, cops and robbers in real life and you just try to take advantage of a bad situation. Now, that's probably not anyone that I'm talking to right now, but there are people who, veterans, cops, security guards, your average civilian, who are not going to be Mr. Nice Guy, who are going to think only for themselves and take advantage of the situation, and at maybe, hopefully not, but maybe at even some point, take advantage of their tactics versus people who don't have any. One of the things that we were taught in the Marine Corps infantry was to close with and destroy the enemy. Close with and destroy the enemy means simply that if we are going to get into a gunfight, I'm going to be walking towards you and shooting at you, which not only does that mess with people psychologically, but I'm closing the distance on my range between you and I. And most likely I think I'm pretty accurate when I say this, but most likely if I'm in my gear, all right, I got all my bulletproof gear on and I got my rifle and I aggressively attack somebody, walking forward and shooting and take them by surprise, they are A, not going to be able to get a shot off, and B, probably not going to stand there and trade rounds with me. And that's not just me. That really goes for damn near anybody. Okay? But don't think those ambush situations won't happen. They happen every day. But the goal is, as you civilians, to be trained to be competent in what happens and takes place within the elements of criminality, how they attack people. And every single active shooter is a criminal. So every home burglar is a criminal. Every robber is a criminal. It's funny I have to say that, but to some of the liberals out there, they don't understand. Just because this person went and killed 6 people in Nashville doesn't make them a martyr, doesn't make them a hero. But there's a portion of this country, to include politicians and people in the White House, who do think that the Nashville shooter in some way was a hero, bullied, standing up to her bullies. It's a sick, sick, demented, violent world that we live in. And if you do not know how to get the violence on, you may just get taken advantage of one day. Now, I have had a few women in the comments section over on Rumble who read me the riot act. Me and Bob Griswold one day were talking about prepping and guns. And I may have said some things that I do mean that offended them or scared them. And I think one of the things I said was, when prophecy has hit the fan, so this is highly theoretical, right? Highly theoretical. When World War III has started and the nukes are raining down and Russia has now started to invade the West Coast, no matter where I am at, if I'm not near my family, I will do everything in my human capability to get home. Everything. And if I have to go through a city filled with thugs and gangsters and crazy people, buddy, I'm going to do what I have to get home. And if I got to wear a few hands on my belt to scare some people because I know the tactic of fear works, I'm not opposed to doing it because the goal is to get home. That doesn't make me unchristian. For a lot of you Christian pacifists out there, please, by all means, unsubscribe because I will never make sense to you. All right. You live in a very violent world. Are we not the type of people who say one day when Jesus comes back, he'll say it's going to be like in the days of Noah. If I didn't come back, there'll be no flesh left alive. What do you people think that meant? What did you think that meant? No flesh left alive. Days of Noah. Hyper violence. Hyper violence. And what tools of violence are people going to be using? What tools of violence are people going to be using? Not airsoft guns. the real ones. Don't ban me, YouTube. They're only airsoft guns. So I created a training called the Active Shooter Awareness and Reaction Course, which is to educate people on active shooter training, give you an active shooter PowerPoint, lasts about 2 to 3 hours long, standard that we did in the government. But there's so much that I have to cover to educate people on the history of active shooters, how law enforcement responds to active shooters, when law enforcement shows up, how you should probably respond so you don't get your ass shot. Like, don't run up screaming and grabbing people, because people are walking around with their finger on the trigger, and a lot of these are rookies and they're shaky, and they've the first time they've ever been in this hell, some veteran cops who've only fired their gun while at the range. All right. Some cops that are out there, even some of the guys that are very, bravo-ish, they beat their chests all the time, talk about how much how super cop they are. They've never been in any actual physical confrontation. I've met some of them, and they're hysterical to be around. But you're gonna have all different types of people. You're gonna have local law enforcement, state law enforcement, possibly federal law enforcement, undercover guys in uniforms, and people are gonna be running in with guns up, looking for the guy who's killing people. So, for one thing, civilians, if you happen to be in a situation where there is an active shooter going on, I'm telling you right now, and you are carrying a firearm, do not pull out your firearm and assist law enforcement unless, as you've made contact with law enforcement. Hell, you may still get arrested. You may still get or detained. You may still get detained when you say, "Hey, I got a gun on me. Can I help you?" Because there's been plenty of times, the Aurora shooter, the Parkland shooter, other places that I can't remember where these types of shootings have happened, where the actual killer has gotten away, that has blended in with the crowd of people. So, and ambushes on law enforcement are starting to become very common now. Where people will call in something that's happening, like a domestic abuse, or some sort of an incident, and then the would-be killer is actually hiding and waiting in ambush to waylay the cops. Okay, so always have that in mind, that we're trained to think for these things. We're trained to see these things, to look for them. And we know that, there's plenty of times when shooters don't work alone, where there's multiple shooters. There was just recently in Florida, horrific case. Um, 3 young men, all black, 3 young men. One is still off. They're looking for him, but they committed a murder. They were robbing cars, and then they end up committing a murder. The ages of the oldest murderer, I believe he was 17, and then the next one was 15, and then the next one was 12. If I'm correct, because the sheriff didn't give out too much information, all 3 had firearms and all 3 shot the victim. 12, 15, and 17. Now, understand what I'm saying. What I don't want is, if you ever happen to be involved in an active shooter, like let's say this Walmart scenario that I was getting around to, you pull out your gun and you take down the shooter, you stop the threat. When law enforcement arrives, put the gun down, or better yet, do everything that they tell you to do, to the T. Don't bitch. Don't complain. Don't say my Second Amendment rights. I'm telling you right now, if the shooting just happened and I showed up, I don't care if you're the good guy or not. I don't know that. I have no idea who you are, who the shooter was. The identity can change. As we gather intel, as we're, hearing from the control center, as we're getting in intel from other law enforcement officers or from witnesses, the person can be all different sorts of shapes and sizes and sex and wearing different clothes, and eventually you get to the shooter, and they might not match any description at all. So one of the things that I would like to tell people is that if you're in this situation and you actually stop the shooter, like that guy in South Carolina at the mall, right? Great. Awesome. Glad you do it. Glad someone was there, right? Out of what? How many people are, in your Walmart at one point in time, and you're the only one who had the testicular fortitude to go and stop the threat. Still, you will be considered a threat until you are identified as not being the threat. All right. That has nothing to do with anything except for the fact that it is just law enforcement has a very rudimentary and careful approach to shootings. Everybody gets arrested. And then we go to see who actually was the victim, who was the assailant, and then you're released from there. And in New York, the assailants were also released, apparently, and in California. So this is one of the things, like when law enforcement approaches, all right, the first thing that you should always do is if you do have a concealed carry, you're open carrying, whatever, do not touch your gun. Let them know, I'm not the shooter, whatever it is you got to say, holster your weapon before they come. Before law enforcement comes, holster your weapon, because God forbid, right? You got 4 or 5 itchy, trigger fingers looking at you, and you decide to make an furtive movement either to your gun, or you have your gun in your hand and you do one of these where you just leveled your gun at people. They're gonna shoot you for it, even if you are the good guy. All right. Not everybody's trained to the same standard in law enforcement. I want you to know that. Not everybody's trained to the same standard. Not everybody has the same mindset. So that means not everybody's a Judge Dredd hardcore, tactical professional. All right. Some are just a bunch of Mary Sues who love the uniform because they love the way they look in it. All right. And I'll pick on the women for a second. Most female officers are dangerous. I know I'm going to get a lot of shit when I say that. Most female officers are dangerous. There is a 20 percentile that are hardcore good to go. Even those can be easily overpowered by a teenage boy. That's just a fact. But here's what I will tell you, though, is that when law enforcement approaches, hands up, fingers spread. This is like the international distress sign of I don't want to get shot in the face, right? So hands up, you do whatever they say. You're probably going to get proned out, which means prone is laying on the ground, face down on the ground, and then they'll give you commands, put your hands behind your back, cross your legs, bring them up to your butt, and then here comes the arrest, and bow, bow. Now you got steel on your wrists. You know, and the active shooter that happened in White Settlement, Texas, a few years ago, and actually I was working with a security team at a Church of Christ here in town, good group of guys, and they actually knew the guy who was at the Church of Christ in White Settlement, where you had a shooter who's a black male walks in. He had been observing the place, I believe, for a day or two already, and he comes in there. If I'm correct, it's a shotgun, and kills one of the security guards. And then this individual, I can't remember his name. Anyways, he one stop shots him, drops him, and story's over. Hero of the day. That insane individual was not allowed to kill anyone else because of one guy with a gun who was willing to use it and had training, and he did have training. However, then this happened. He was arrested. He went to a grand jury trial. He was convicted of murder. That hence why he went to that grand jury trial. The DA convicted him of murder. The city of White Settlement sued him. The Church of Christ sued him. 4 members of the Church of Christ in there individually sued him. And then also the killer's family sued him. And this is all civil suits. He was found not guilty, but still, he was still sued civilly. So, and there's a bunch of different organizations out there that you can get for gun insurance. I don't care which one you go with a reputable one. I've recently applied for and waiting for my concealed carry instructor's permit so I can be teaching concealed carry classes, and along with that, all the other shit that I like to teach people. And I'll be pushing very, very hard for people to get concealed carry insurance, because this guy, the concealed carry group, the insurance group, covered him up to like $10 million in court fees. Who's got $10 million laying around? Nobody. And they got his gun back. Got him out of jail. All right. Guys, this is the process. You're going to be arrested, fingerprinted. You're going to go to jail. You're not going to get your gun back, most likely. Okay. If you have the right type of insurance, and these lawyers are on standby 24/7, at least the group here in Texas is. All right. They're a damn good group of boys and girls who work on that group. They saved that man's life. They saved him from so much heartache and stress. Most of us will never make $10 million in our lifetime. You'll probably pay that in taxes, but you'll never see it. So how in the hell can you afford that in a court? So have the concealed carry insurance. Not only that, but the concealed carry insurance, it also protects you from, like, dude, if you stab somebody, if you got into a fist fight with somebody and knocked them out, they went to, the hospital or whatever, they actually cover you for that. Some of these do, not all of them do, but make sure that you're covered for defensive actions. All right, defensive actions. And then I'm sure they offer a wide variety of other things. And it's relatively cheap. I think like the premium package was like $30 a month. All right. So for a few you ladies, don't go to Starbucks for 2 days out of the week, and now you just paid for your premium insurance for carrying your gun concealed. My wife goes to Starbucks. I know how much it costs. Do not debate me on this. So, getting back to it, I do teach an active shooter class. I teach people, everything about the active shooter PowerPoint, all the stats, tons of videos. It also goes into mass stabbings. I teach about the mass stabbings. I teach about the gang violence, the amount of the violence from the riots that we've seen lately. I'm working on how to share information of how to act during protests and riots, but I really think it's kind of common sense. Don't go to them. That's my common sense. But if you're in there, if you're in a protest that turns riotous, here's my advice to you as a guy who was a riot cop for a long time. Get out of our way. Don't throw shit at us. We don't like that because we throw nasty stuff back at you. And the other thing is that, if these protests are growing, and their veracity for violence, they're getting very, very violent. And these protests, both the right and the left, man, the Trump protests and every other kind of protests out there, it's being hijacked. It's being hijacked. Here, look, where the hell did my mouse go? We have the FBI is currently in trouble again. Anyways, I'll find the article and I'll insert it. The FBI is in trouble again for having these undercover agents or informants that are involved in these protest groups. A lot of times it is to stir up instigation, though they rarely ever admit it. So let's bring up some more facts real quick. Okay. I don't want this to be a super long video, but I do want to teach you a little bit of something. Home break-ins per year. Why should you own a gun? Why should you get training? How about this? Home break-ins per year. All right. Home burglaries decreased 73% over the past 10 years, according to the analysis of the FBI. Which, yeah, maybe so, but I think that's because a lot more people got armed in the past 10 years. In 2010, there were recorded 1,402,214 home burglaries. In 2016, there were 1,054,470. In 2020, there were 300,000 or 377,805. And the year before that, 2019, there was 576,607. So that's quite a bit of a difference, right? Why is that? Well, in 2020, we had the largest amount of Americans like ever within recent history go and buy firearms, both on the left and the right. Do you know what a firearm is? It's called a deterrent. Gun owners are deterrents for criminals. Home break-ins by the numbers. 522,426 burglaries occurred in the U.S. in 2020. 62,000 of those burglaries were home break-ins. Or excuse me, 62% of them were home break-ins. That means most likely you at night resting, sleeping, doing podcasts. All right. There's actually been a couple of YouTube podcasters that have been killed recently by their stalkers. God forbid, don't come to my house if you can make it past the dogs, and you got to meet with me. And by the way, if I'm correct, both of those were women, so don't put yourself out there. But 62% of 522,000 were home break-ins. So while you're laying in bed, think about this as you're laying in bed. Your head's on your pillow. Where's your gun at? How quickly can you get to it? Is your gun loaded or not loaded? Did you put your magazine over here and your gun over here? Is your gun in your safe? How fast can you get to your safe? Is it a key safe, or is it a safe where you got to put your ear to the door and spin the dial a couple times? And shit, I forgot the combination again. So have a clear and present mind with defending your castle, how you're going to do that. If you're going to do it with a firearm, have at least one firearm readily available that's cleaned, it's lubricated, it's not shoved inside a dirty sock, and it's kept underneath your bed, and there's lint and stuff in there that'll cause possibly a malfunction when you don't need it. Oh, and by the way, is it a revolver, or is it something that holds a lot of bullets? You know why that might actually matter, Mr. and Mrs. Congressman who wants to take away our guns? Because on the Northeast, there's been an epidemic of young men from the ranges of 3 to, I think the last one was 12 men who rushed into a house of a senior citizen. You know what they did? They knocked on the door. Police, open up. That's all they did. Did it a couple times. Police, open up. You know what happened? That unlocked door became that locked door became unlocked, opened up, bum rush, 12 guys into your house. I'm a pretty big, strong guy. I don't think I can stop 12 guys, but my gun will.
Dramatic security video of a father killed last month in a home invasion in Syria shows his final moments. ABC 10's Kurt Rivera shows us the family debated releasing the video, but did so in hopes they can find justice. We want to warn you, these images are disturbing.
22-year-old Christian Sanchez leaving his home, but is suddenly ambushed by 5 armed gunmen.
I'm opening. What's your name?
It happened here in the 2600 block of Gondring Road in a very rural part of Ceres. It was September 27th around 6 a.m. Christian was heading off to work as a welder. It was his second day on the job.
There's kids in the house?
Yes, please. Hey, that's all I asked for, bro.
Christian mentions the name Raul to the suspects, who then ask him where the money is at and proceed to go inside, acting as law enforcement.
Sheriff's Department.
One suspect then tries to break the security camera, but is unsuccessful.
Moments caught on camera as a Phoenix homeowner protects themselves from several suspects trying to break in.
The Phoenix Police Department released this surveillance video tonight. You can see 4 men kicking in a front door only to be met by gunfire from the homeowner. That homeowner says they were alerted by a motion sensor.
Exclusive, a would-be robber trying to kick down a door and storming a South Florida home.
But seconds later, the homeowner and that protective mother grabs her shotgun, quickly turning the tables. Local 10's Andrew Perez live in Miami Gardens with the exclusive. Andrew.
And this mother tells us she was prepared to do whatever she had to protect her children. This intruder was aggressive, but he was no match for mom. Close to 10 in the morning, this guy casually walks up. He knocks on the front door of this Miami Gardens home. He's in full view of the highway. He looks around, and then this. He tries forcing the door open. He tries kicking it down repeatedly. A mother inside with her 2 young children. But investigators say he messed with the wrong mom.
Yes, he did. Yeah. I would do anything to protect my family.
We're not identifying that mother, but she told us she was home with her 10 and 3-year-old kids.
All of a sudden, I hear some banging noise. I thought it was maybe my dreams or something.
She says she peeked through the window and then her instincts just kicked in. She ran for the bedroom, grabbed her shotgun. She says she was shaking but ready to protect her children.
Now, 24% of all burglaries were committed by people who knew their victim in 2020. Who knew their victim. You know what that means? There was a guy I knew that was arrested one time. He was called the Door Kick King or some stupid thing like that. That was his Facebook page. And what this guy did was in his local area, he monitored the Facebooks of people within his local area who would go on vacations. And then when you would post a vacation from your cell phone, you can actually find the geocache location and date and time. Longitude, latitude, time. Man, the NSA taught us a lot of stuff that you can find on these pictures. And that's what he was doing. So you'd be on your cruise, all right? And I'm the Door Kick King. And oh, look, there's Susan and her family on a cruise. Man, ain't that great. Well, Susan, I know, lives about 5 blocks down from me. And I go by there all the time. She ain't got dogs. She ain't got cameras or alarms. So here, let's click on this picture. Yep, she's in Cancun. Was posted yesterday. Time to pay her house a visit. And he talked about it. Him and his little brother. They did it. He said he had done it hundreds of times. And this is a well-known tactic among criminals. You know what's not a well-known tactic among homeowners? How to defend your home. That's not a well-known tactic. You think a bolt lock is how you defend your home. You can bolt lock every door in your house. I'm going to go right through your window because you can't bolt lock the window. And most of your windows are single pane or double pane. They're not tempered glass, so I can pretty much get right through any house window in America. And that's the way these criminals think. The thing that they don't want to have to do is they don't want to have to face down a hallway with a shotgun pointed right at them, or that gun owner coming around the corner with their pistol. That's not what they want to have to do, because criminals are cowards. The moment they get an aggressive attacker, they typically flee. They're not there to fist fight with you. They're not there to shoot you and kill you. They're there to rob your stuff and leave. Okay? But what about the serial killers? What about the people who are there to get you? The people who abduct people and sell them in human trafficking? Yeah, there's a little epidemic of that in America. So you need to be prepared for a wide variety of things. And it seems to be that the firearm is the best weapon of choice currently. Maybe a chainsaw. You know, I've actually considered that quite a bit, of staging a chainsaw right over there by my door. So whenever someone kicks in the door, the first thing they're going to hear is not the pump of a shotgun. It's going to be the roaring of a chainsaw. Who knows? Maybe that'll scare them off, because when they take our guns, that's what we'll be forced to use.
Who kicked the door into his apartment late last night.
But it wasn't a gun, knife, or even a bat that kept the intruder at bay. Instead, it was a replica battle axe.
Barton Dieters is in studio control with this story, all new tonight. Barton?
Brian and Marley, the 33-year-old suspect, is in jail now, facing a charge of first-degree home invasion, which could put him in prison for a maximum of 20 years. Whatever his reason was for kicking in the door of the Oshtemo apartment, he probably was not expecting to run into a guy who does this on the weekends.
Well, number one, it's not LARPing. A lot of people are like, oh, is it LARPing? And it's like, no. This Band-Aid was actually from filming last night for our newest episode.
When he's not working at Applebee's, 36-year-old Ben Ball competes in the events where people compete against each other in ritualized combat. He owns a lot of period weaponry reminiscent of the kind used by Vikings and barbarian warriors that he keeps around his apartment.
I've got a double-headed carbon steel battle axe that was homemade by a gentleman who has since passed. That's what I call my baby.
Ball says that the suspect dated a former roommate who left to get away, and he showed up at the apartment around 11:30 p.m. Wednesday. The suspect knocked on the door repeatedly as Ball was in his apartment playing video games and watching Rick and Morty. Then the suspect kicks at the door.
It might have broken in on twice, but it may have been the third, but I was reaching already over here.
And this is what Ball pulled out, a sharpened battle axe.
Door open, grab the axe, step, hit.
Ball said he had reason to believe the suspect had a firearm. The axe hit the intruder at least once in the torso, and then the two started grappling in the apartment, destroying the place.
There's a bloody mess everywhere.
Finally, the suspect gave up and made a run for it. A neighbor called 911 and police showed up. Canines followed the trail of blood to apprehend the suspect. Bell identifies the suspect as Axel Lavelle Rawls, who's currently held in the...
Right? Joey Behart. We can be like Australia. Even though all the criminals still kept all their guns, right? You know, and some of you people who don't believe in guns, good luck. God be with you. The average loss per burglary in 2016 was $2,661. 290,909 home burglaries took place during the daytime in 2019. 56% of burglaries involved forcible entry in 2019. 38% of burglars walked into an unlocked home in 2019. And 1.4 million firearms were stolen during home burglaries and other property crimes from 2005 to 2010. So as a criminal, yeah, you're there for, you know, grandma's Oxycontin. You're there to look for the gold and silver that a lot of you people like to buy all the time. And you like to tell people how much you buy it in the comment section. And what else? Oh yeah, they're there for your guns. They're going to take your car. Everything that is available, they're going to walk out with or drive out with or run out with. It's when they feel that they can't run out with their lives. That's when things change. So, and here's another thing for you. Lawyers told us this, but they don't tell you civilians this. But if you were one of those people who talk to a lawyer, I promise you they tell you this. For all of you who have a sign at your house that says, like, I will kill you if you come on my property, or if you break into my house, we don't call 911 around here. Many cases now of home burglars where the burglar was shot, wounded, not killed, are now suing the homeowner. And the defensive attorney, well, I guess you could say that the offensive attorney is actually saying that it's premeditated murder on the part of the homeowner. Because look at this sign. Same thing with firearms, by the way. If you get into a shooting, your firearms being taken away. And for all you who have like Punisher signs and, you know, all this, you know, really tactical stuff all over your rifles and all over your pistols, if it's not like plain from the manufacturer and it has something that looks like death on it, it's going to be used against you. Even if you got an upgraded trigger, it's going to be used against you. Why did you carry a weapon with an upgraded trigger? I mean, for many of you out there, like, well, because the Glock trigger, you know, the stock Glock trigger is garbage. It's not good, though I've shot the shit out of it, and I think it's fine. But you know, they're going to take it and they're going to do all the stuff to it, and they're even going to use, you know, something as silly as just having new sights on your gun. You're going to have to literally prove your innocence all the way through a crime committed against you. That is the lawlessness in this country now that the Bible has spoke about. All right. Let's move on to new topic. Oh God. I don't really know that I want to bring this up, but I guess I'm gonna bring this up. My wife and I were thoroughly discussed whenever we saw this, but I shouldn't be surprised at all. The Dalai Lama, who is 87 years old, apologizes after kissing young boy on the lips in public and asking the child to suck on his tongue in a bizarre interaction captured on video at a charity event in India. You can see where he's literally sticking his tongue out, pointed at his tongue. I can't understand what he's saying, but he stuck his tongue out. Him and the kid leaned, which is a boy, leaned forehead to forehead with his tongue like this far from the boy's mouth. I don't know what to say. Reprobate. The head of the Buddhist. Reprobate. There you go. Turn to Christ. Here we go. Next thing. The Nashville shooter, by the way, if you didn't know this, and it's funny because your politicians who don't know jack nor shit, but they're surrounded by guys with guns and say you don't need guns and you don't need these large capacity magazines. Is 17 really the large capacity? Joseph Biden. It's how many rounds your person, the people you promote, people that you say, this person that you say now is a saint. Oh, I've heard it. A saint. Make me sick. This person shot this many rounds at this school. 152 total rounds. 126 rifle rounds. 26 9mm rounds. So if your people from the loony left aren't going to abide by your own rules, why should we? Get the hell out of here. This is actually a question. It's a little off topic, but it's actually a question from a subscriber. And this is to me and Brent Height, the explorer Brent Height, who's our team leader for our paleo research group, and also for Dave Hodges. And this person, Brian Bloom, asked, have any of you men heard about an alien city under the Arkansas that was accessed from Cushman's Cave? It was found back in the early 2000s by 7 spelunkers. Now, I read this in a magazine in my dentist's office. Just wondering if you've heard about this, but the best part, these men were approached by 3 10-foot men with large eyes, and they told these 7 men that they found the city 25,000 years ago and that it was built by a man called Noah, and the cave is now closed off to the public by military steel bars block the entrance. Okay, so Brian, to answer your question, I have not heard of that. I'll go and investigate it next time we're out in Arkansas crawling around in caves, which now that, thank God, thank you, Lord, for getting them back safely. Now that Brent and Mondo Gonzalez are back home and safe, because they were just in Israel recently, we're going to get back to our caving tours. I don't know what you would call it, but we crawl into some of the nastiest, deepest, darkest places to try and see if we can find any remnants of culture that were there that leads us to a culture that is not Native American, that predates the Native Americans. And if so, does that culture, the mound builder culture, bring light to the, I guess you could say, the knowledge by the Native Americans, the verbal history of giants in America? So, see you in the next cave. We'll let you know. Next. All right, here's the case I really want to talk about. Austin DA says it's deeply troubling that Texas Governor Greg Abbott wants to pardon Army sergeant that was convicted of murder. Daniel Perry was convicted of murder last week for shooting and killing Garrett Foster at a Black Lives Matter protest in 2020. So just to break this whole thing down, Barney style, as quickly as possible so we can keep moving on. Perry, who's a sergeant in the Army, I believe is an Uber driver in Austin. And he has a revolver on him to protect himself. All right. And he said a bunch of statements across all different types of social media. I don't really care about any of those statements. But he is now in the middle of one of these violent Black Lives Matter Antifa protests, riots. And Garrett Foster comes up with an AK-47 and approaches his car. Now, it's being labeled. Oh, here's another little airsoft toy to train with if you don't want to use all your 5.56. It was being labeled that Garrett Foster was in the high ready position with his rifle. From the picture that I've seen so far, that doesn't look the case. It looks like he's in the low ready, but low ready and a slung rifle are two different things. You can sling your rifle to where it's on the back in a crowd. I wouldn't suggest doing that. Or you can sling your rifle to where it's in the front and it's in a resting position. No hands are on the rifle, absolute resting position. Okay. But in the picture that I'm going to show here, you will see that Garrett Foster has his rifle like this. Okay. His rifle is slightly up, pointed towards Perry's car. And how would you take that in the middle of the 2020 riots, when people have died in these riots? People have been getting pulled out of their cars, beaten, sometimes beaten to death, cars set on fire, cars then completely ransacked and robbed. Do you not have a right to defend yourself in this country? Supreme Court, I would really love to know that question. You have a right for me to defend you, but do we have a right to defend ourselves? And to what extent do we no longer have that right? Common sense, guys. It's not applied anymore. So Garrett Foster has his AK-47, pointed like this, okay? I don't know what all is being said, but considering the fact that it's a Black Lives Matter protest, rally, insurrection, whatever, I would have to say that threats are being made, and apparently people were trying to get into the car. Now, you can't drive through a crowd of people, though you absolutely can. You can't drive through a crowd of people because guess what you're doing? You're targeting people, all right? That's one of the things that they'll say, and that is committing vehicular homicide. And every person you didn't kill is going to sue the shit out of you civilly. So you kind of think about these things, right? At least, you know, most of us do. That guy up north, I can't remember, what was it, Minnesota, that ran over 60 kids. Oh, yeah, another leftist, another crazed leftist. Yeah, he didn't think about that, did he? Notice a pattern here. So this poor guy feels like he needs to defend himself. He defends himself because look, guys, if I'm in my vehicle and you walk up with a gun like this at the low ready, here's the high ready, here's the low ready. Typically, your fingers on the trigger, all right, or fingers straighten out the trigger, ready to fire. I'm going to pull out my gun and probably do the same thing back at you because it's a split second for someone to go from here to here and fire. All right. What reaction time do you have right here? None. None. And I'll gladly come to the defense of Mr. Perry in the courtroom to explain that with my cool airsoft guns and this guy, Garrett Foster's lawyer. By all means, we can do ourselves a little showdown and see who's faster. Because the BBs will tell you who's faster. It hurts. Some of you guys been to the training, you know. Two to the chest, one to the head. Right in the leg. Oh, yeah, dude, right here. Right here. Okay. No zipper drill. Calm it. No zipper drill. 4 shots, center mass. 4 shots, center mass. 4 shots center mass with movement. It's sad. I don't want to see this happen. I don't want to see my own fellow Americans killing each other, but I can't stop that, and it's going to happen. But what makes this worse is this statement, okay? Perry is a Daniel Perry is a Army veteran, or is still in the Army at the time. Garrett Foster is an Air Force veteran. So you have potentially a veteran who has killed another veteran, a conservative veteran who has killed a leftist, crazed veteran. And for anyone out there in the veteran community who listens to me, please let us hear your comments and thoughts. I see this as a very, very bad trend. You know, I will state that quite a few of the people that we arrested in the Portland riots that were veterans were Navy and Air Force. I can't explain to you why, but Navy and Air Force. Honestly, I don't think we arrested one Marine. So Greg Abbott says that he's going to pardon this guy, which he should. The guy was clearly in self-defense, no matter how the left spins it or the right, right? Seems like the Constitution is like the dividing line between the Republicans and the Democrats now, right? And all the leftists are coming unglued. They're coming unglued, and now there are threats of violence in Austin. And of course, Austin, because Austin is Portland 2.0, they probably have a direct flight from Austin to Portland and Seattle. And here's another thing. I got an email from one of the guys who's on our Patreon page. Oh, by the way, I have a Patreon. I never talk about it, apparently, and I get myself in trouble for not talking about it. If you want to join the American Vindicta Show Patreon page, once or twice a month, we have a roundtable discussion, a Ask Me Anything type of video. They've lasted anywhere between 30 minutes to 2.5 hours before. Last time we were talking about all different types of crazy stuff. And I'm also getting to now like a lot of the unedited parts of the videos that I do, and interviews and some other stuff that I'm going to be putting out is going to be going on to Patreon. I haven't posted anything video-wise on Patreon for a while because Patreon, for a while, if you wanted to post a video, you had to upload it to Vimeo. So that means I had to pay for a Vimeo account, and then it had to be uploaded by Patreon. And the two websites just don't talk to each other. And it was garbage. And it was incredibly frustrating. Almost none of my videos ever went up. So I just said, screw it. And so I just put out, little intelligence things here and there, or just asking people how they're doing. I like to keep in good comms with people. So Robert, he's a member of our Patreon page. He sent me this. He said, this happened to me just over an hour ago. I had a potential use of force just happen earlier today. On my way out to the supermarket, I saw 8 to 10 black youths walking down the road, and as I pulled away, they were looking into a Cadillac Escalade parked alongside the road. Turns out I saw the owner getting into the car upon my return and told them what I had seen. She told me that her car had been gone into and a duffel bag in the back had been taken, and the contents of the glove box were all strewn about the front. It didn't look like a forced entry, so I'm thinking the doors were unlocked. When I was leaving earlier, a few of them gazed over at me and I returned the gaze, and they kept walking to the car that they came in. I'm glad they were seeking an easier score. Otherwise, I'd be on the phone to the lawyer right now and doing a police report. Now, Robert is absolutely accurate when he said that last part. Because he's a man, they chose a unlocked vehicle instead of him to rob, or a female. The thing about it like this, guys, in a predatory mindset, which are criminals, does it make sense for the lion to go and attack the saltwater 22-foot long crocodile to have his his late night snack? Or does it make more sense for him to sneak up on the unsuspecting zebra or gazelle? Right? You're not going to fight something that can potentially kill you. All right? Because your goal, this is your job as a criminal, is to steal people's money. So you're not going to go and potentially, try and fight somebody who can steal your life. So here's the other thing. I know this is kind of common sense, but apparently it's not. Lock the doors to your home and to your cars when you leave. When you do leave, make sure you lock everything. Don't leave windows open or any of that other stuff. And situational awareness, 360 degrees situational awareness when you get out of the car. Here I am, parked. I'm looking forward to see if anybody's looking at me. I'm looking to my left because that's the closest person who would be sitting next to me. Is anybody looking at me? Nope. Looking to my right. Is anybody looking at me? Nope. I'm going to look in my rearview mirror. Is anybody looking at me? Nope. I'm going to double check and turn and look. Nobody's looking at me. I'm going to get out my car. This is when you got to start thinking a little tactical. When you get out your car, this is what I do. All right. I learned this as a cop. When I get out of my car, open my door, I swing myself so that both feet sit down on the floor, and immediately I have access to my firearm. And from there, I'm doing the same thing. When I stand up, 360-degree check. I'm looking for everything in every general direction. I'm not on my phone. I'm paying attention to everyone who's looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and they know that we're looking at each other. All right. That makes people uncomfortable. And then I proceed to do whatever I need to do. And I get inside the grocery store or Home Depot or whatever, and then I do what I need to, and then I get out. I'm not lingering. Unless my wife and I are looking at flowers, and we're lingering for hours. But, do what you need to. Stay off your phone. Eyes open, eyes up. Watch the threat and be ready. It doesn't mean walk around like this with my hand on my pistol and being paranoid, right? Use common freaking sense. Don't look like a potential victim. Okay, here we go. DOJ admits that of the 13 Proud Boys involved with January 6th, 8 or more of them were paid by the FBI to provide the government information about the group. The FBI was the majority of Proud Boys. Only 5 are being prosecuted. You guys really suck at life. Got a wonderful video from Joe Biden. All right. This is Joe Biden back in 2007. Listen to what he says.
Difference to tell the American people the truth about what our options are in ending this war. If tomorrow the order goes out from I'm President of the United States, I issue an order, end the war today, begin to withdraw all American troops. It will take a year to get the American troops out. Do you hear me now? That's the truth. It will take a year to get them physically out. Now, if you leave all the equipment behind, you might be able to do it in 7 months. And you leave those billions of dollars of weapons behind, I promise they're going to be used against your grandchild and mine someday. And you leave those billions of dollars of weapons behind, I promise they're going to be used against your grandchild and mine someday.
They're going to be used against your grandchild and mine someday when they eventually evacuate Iraq and Afghanistan. And they did. And they are. And they will continue to be. Just like Fast and the Furious, when we gave guns to the cartel, and the cartel started to use it against our own law enforcement and civilians here in America. Seems like guns aren't the problems, but the politicians are. So the Doug and Dave Intel report, we're about to wrap up. Doug and Dave Intel report. We just recently did a MK Ultra Part 4 on Rumble, and we went over some other stuff that we think are very pertinent. We've gone over the Brooklyn subway shooter. We've gone over the Buffalo shooter, the Uvalde shooter, and now the Nashville shooter and this other kid from Colorado who was just caught before committing the shooting. So head on over to Rumble. I think you'll really enjoy that. That was really, really fun. And that's something that we can never talk about on YouTube because YouTube sucks. Lastly, before YouTube completely cancels me, don't worry, because this will be on Rumble as well. I find that it is a pertinent time right now to be going over spiritual warfare. So for all you out there who are interested, completely for free. So if you want to throw me a few $bucks here and there, that would be cool. But for completely free, I'm going to do a audio narration of The Black Awakening from Russ Dizdar. As far as I know, I don't think there is a audio narration of this book, but me and my wife find that this is a perfect time to be giving you more information of how to carry out your warfare, especially you, the warrior priest of the household. And this book is not easy to come by. If only we had more Russ Dizdars. If only. So we also have a study guide for this book. I'm going to put together a couple of things that I think are good to understand. There's also another book called Satan Hunter, which was wrote by a law enforcement investigator. It's about occultism and the rituals, satanic ritual abuse, things for you to be able to spot in your own area. Currently I'm working on my own little private investigation about something like that here in this godforsaken area that I'm in. And this book and the other one that I mentioned are great tools. After that, guys, it's being prayed up. Make sure that you're walking in faith with the Lord, that you're not walking outside of where he wants you to go. Guys, you should know this by now. I'm not a preacher, okay? I'm not a priest, but I'm not ashamed and I am not afraid to preach the word of God. And I'll tell you this much. You need to be in your Bible more than ever. You need to be training more than ever. You need to be prepping more than ever. I'm not saying liquidate everything that you own and buy one of these bunkers to put underneath the ground. Be smart. Be practical. Be tactical. It's only getting weirder out there, guys. That's all I got for you. Stay frosty. The enemy's out there.
Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum has said, "You will own nothing and you will love it." And that's represented by what's going on across the planet today, where the economy of the world is in free fall, and nowhere is it more in evidence than with our own President Biden deliberately trying to sabotage what we have. Access to food, other resources. So Americans are in a unique position, really for the first time in our history. We're going to have to provide for ourselves or subject ourselves to the whim of the government. Do you really trust a government to feed you that left 1,000 Americans behind enemy lines in Afghanistan? I don't think so. So where do you go? When you ask the question, who's the best prepper out there today? There's only one answer. Ready Made Resources and Robert Griswold. I call him King Prepper, and that's how a lot of people think of him. You have everything there you'd want, from night vision to storable food, how to prepare cooking in emergency situations, books and videos on how to prepare alternative energy, communication, first aid that you wouldn't think of, natural antibiotics, you name it, Bob has it. Now, here's the good thing about Bob Griswold that no one else does but him. You don't have to buy anything to talk to him. If you're not sure where to start with your preparation, no obligation phone call directly to Bob. You can talk to him for free. Most people will charge you an arm and a leg for a half-hour conversation. That's not Bob Griswold. He cares about helping America get prepared. Go to readymaderesources.com, or you can call the number directly at 800-627-3809. Again, that contact information, readymaderesources.com for the best prepping outfit in the country, or call Bob Griswold directly, 800-627-3809.
Mountain State Survival covers your basis for your planning, prepping, evacuation, bugging in, or bugging out needs. They carry anything from educational material, camping supplies, emergency services supplies, food, first aid, survival kit and equipment, shooting gear, survival gear, tactical gear. They carry it all. They got it in stock. Give Mountain State Survival a ring. That's mountain-state-survival.com. Get this type of supplies while you still can. 304-517-6935. Mountain State Survival is one of the only places that I know of currently that is still carrying the delicious Peak Refuel meal that is ready to eat. It's personally the only thing that I eat at this point whenever I go out camping, whenever we have any type of emergency or disaster situation. That is the meal that I stick with, and you can find that at mountain-state-survival.com. Use REKKR5 for a 5% discount on your overall purchase. That's REKKR 5, mountain-state-survival.com. This show on the Heroes Nation app. Heroes Nation is the Heroes Nation app you can download in the App Store. It's up and coming. They got a lot of cool information on there. That is the main backup site so far for the American Vindicta show. We'll also have some stuff on there that won't be on YouTube. It won't be on Rumble. It'll either be only on the gsradio.net, who is the host of the American Vindicta show, or it will only be an exclusive for Heroes Nation. And with that, I mean, stuff that we're doing with the cave exploration, with the archaeological stuff. I'm going to start getting into a lot of paranormal talks and, coming at that from my law enforcement and Christian perspective, and be having guests on, and that will be exclusive to Heroes Nation. So make sure that you give them some love. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for supporting me. God bless you, and have a good day.